Welcome to Triangle BNI. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. Folks, there's a lot of noise out there these days in social media. Everybody throwing stuff up there multiple times a day, trying to get seen and heard. You need some professionals on your side to get your message out there, and the folks at Oak City Tech can do that. Go to oakcitytech.com, let them know what you're looking for, and I know they'll be able to help you. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Manning. Each week, we bring you a small business success story from Triangle BNI. If you are not familiar with BNI, it is Business Networking International, the world's largest networking organization. Our little slice of heaven here in the Triangle is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. Each week, about 30 members, about 30 chapters, and almost 600 members get together. And the only thing we really try to do is help each other grow their business. Our small business success story today is Mr. Chip Galusha, a independent associate of LegalShield. Chip, how are you?
I am doing well. Thank you very much.
Good. And Chip is in Greenville, North Carolina,
So
which is just east of Raleigh, if you like geography, but that also falls under Triangle BNI. So Chip, glad to have you here today. I know it's cold for us Southern boys. How are you holding up?
it is cold, and it's not the land of my birth, but it is my current land, and I got used to not being cold, and all of a sudden here we are. And thanks for correcting that East of 95 thing, because we like to feel part of the region too out here.
Yes, you are very much a part of the region, just a little bit outside the Triangle City limits. So
just a little bit.
So what temperature can you go outside with your head of hair and feel comfortable?
I pretty much am reaching for the toboggans if the first digit's a 5. It's I don't. Yeah, it just makes all the difference in the world.
Oh yeah. Yeah, my wife cuts my hair and she keeps reminding me it's thinning. So I'm like, oh man, just tell me you love me.
On the other hand, you keep making her job easier for her.
It does take less and less time each month when she cuts my hair. That is for sure. So, and I tell her just to cut the gray ones, leave the dark ones, but she said there'd be nothing left.
Yeah, I said that's what I said too on mine, and then the barber said okay, and so this is what I got.
LegalShield, a lot of people know of it. We've heard about it, but there are so many ways that you help protect people. And some of the things we've never even thought about we need protection on. You and I are from the same generation. We did not have to worry about internet and cybersecurity, but there's just all kinds of things that we need to be on the lookout for, don't we?
There is, and it's unfortunate, and it kind of gets worse. And you invent the house, and somebody invents the burglary, and then you invent the lock, and they invent the lock picker. So as we go, these things are great. The internet is marvelous. Think about what we'd be trying to do now if we had to do the schools at home but didn't have the internet. So it's brilliant and it's helpful, but it does put a lot of our information out there, and we need to be careful for it. So that's it. The other piece is what's interesting to me about attorneys and lawyers, and well, not them personally, but the practice is you tend to associate the fact that you need an attorney if it's a negative association. A crime pops into your brain. But there's so many things, and I think back on my young adulthood, how many apartment leases I signed and didn't have anybody review that, or 40% of Americans have a will, 60% of Americans don't have estate planning and getting a will done, and as you mentioned, the online bullying sessions, and how to notice that and how to take care of that. So there's a whole lot of everyday life things, life stages that you go through, other than just the things we think about, like speeding tickets and those sort of things, where you need that protection. But sometimes it's just great to be able to say, hey, let me just call an attorney.
And at its core, that's what the service people are buying, is access to an attorney at any time, anywhere.
Indeed. And that's really what it's all about. And I introduce it a lot of times by just saying it's the Netflix of the legal service. Used to be, you pay, if you wanted to go to a movie, you paid to go to that movie. If you wanted to go to a second movie, you paid to go to that movie. And then Netflix and a lot of other folks and the ride shares and on all of that come in and say, well, tell you what, you just pay me a low subscription, and anytime you want, you can just call up and talk to an attorney and get advice. It beats a search engine. And you know the advice is real, and you know that the attorneys are real, and that's really what it's all about, is just how do I have an opportunity. Our CEO says that, and I really thought this was amazing, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution gives everybody access to legal, gives everybody legal protection, equal protection under the law. The question becomes equal access. And that's really what LegalShield is. It's a vehicle on the personal side to just give you access at not 100, 200, 300 dollars an hour, to just ask the questions that you want to know about.
One of the things I like about BNI is not only believing that you should shop local, nothing against all the national brands and this, that, and the other, but you shop local, people have our numbers so they can call us instead of, when you have to punch in your 16-digit code, stuff like that. The other thing I like about BNI, once I got into it, I learned things, and particularly about LegalShield and protection. And it never dawned on me that one of the things we would need protection for on identity theft is for medical attention and access to drugs or medical care or doctors or anything like that. I always thought somebody's trying to get into my bank account, but not true.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think more and more, they don't, it's identity theft. They steal your identity. They don't steal your stuff. I have a identity theft client who we got connected because somebody somehow got his driver's license and he was from here, went up to Raleigh, test drove a truck and stole it. So if somebody has a copy of your license, you'd never know it unless something horrible happens. And here he is, 70, 80 miles away. And the police could call you and say, hey, so about that truck you stole. So yeah, it's not stealing your money necessarily. You go to the hospital and find out that the hospital records have a different blood type for you than you have because somebody used your identity, stole it from you, and then used it to gain access to other things. Or one of the things I thought was true, you said that the legal stuff, the one that caught me by surprise was we monitor U.S. Postal Service change of address forms because somebody steals gets your address, puts in a change of address form, and then applies for a credit card or has Amazon product shipped or something. And it go, and you don't even know. It's like maybe some of the mail drops off and, but if you're like me and you've been moving stuff to email for a while, you don't get much physical mail. It would take me a week or so to notice, really. Yeah. And then by the time you forget, they say, well, you put in a change of address form. And by then, the credit card application or the social security verification or whatever it is that was supposed to come to your address goes to a separate address. So it can be any kind of thing that people steal. And then again, they steal your identity in order to use it other places. They don't, steal your identity to steal your money. They use your identity to steal other people's money.
And we've heard stories about even tax refunds.
Mm-hmm. Once, if you're still on the mailing list, and if you don't do direct deposit, and then that form goes through and your address changes, that tax refund check goes somewhere else. If they know enough about you, if they put together little bits of information and they can, somehow get your PIN code and change your your IRS login, they could change that direct deposit thing. So it's about piecing together all the little bits of information that people can get about you and for you. I mean, think about it. We've kind of gone away from mother's maiden name, but if you call up your bank and, it wouldn't take a person, I don't want to pick on anybody, it wouldn't take a person long to hang around with you and figure out what, what your mother's maiden name used to be. They know your address. It's not hard to figure out your birthday with, being all over the social medias and all of that. You put 3 or 4 or 5 of those things together and you can dial up and change all kinds of stuff and services. So it's very important.
In the social media aspect, Chip, the things people post on their Facebook page, what cracks me up is, hey, we're getting ready to go on a 2-week vacation. Come on, people, think this through just a little bit, okay?
Yeah, and here's my address, and here's how, make sure you count. And it's even weird little things like the little stickers on the back of cars. You got the husband, the wife, and the 4 kids. So make sure all 4 kids are out of the house before you rob it, because you know how many. Oh, we have a dog, right? So you've advertised all of these things. So it's social media, and it's oversharing a little bit. And then you take the pictures and you show that we're away, and I know that you and all your family's in Disneyland right now, and so there's nobody at your house.
And yeah, and then the odds, do they have the ring? Do they have any kind of security or anything like that? And again, and then you hear stories about hackers getting into your alarm system through your Fitbit or something like that. It's just amazing the skills that people have to get access
Yeah.
to your stuff.
Yeah, I use my favorite example of that is the refrigerator, right? So you've got a refrigerator that reads the barcodes of stuff as you take it out, so that it can tell you what your grocery list would be. It means it's on your Wi-Fi, which means that somebody can drive by and hack through your fridge or your blender or your microwave, and TV. I mean, Fire Stick. Who knows? But the more the Internet of Things takes off, and the more that we begin to wear Fitbits and wear all this internet connected stuff, it puts all that out there for security problems.
What are the most common calls you get?
Um, the most common calls are um, probably, well, I say two. I'm lucky to get some about people that realize that they need to take care of a thing. And specifically on the identity theft side, it's the I got a letter from a company and we just had a data hack, and they said my information may be out there. And you get the free credit free services, and that's good for credit, but financial theft is different than identity theft. And so somebody will find out, that get a letter that says your name and birthday and password may have been exposed through some sort of breach that we had, and they'll want to protect that. And unfortunately, the other side of it is people whose bank has called them or something, and there's been a breach, and there's actually been some kind of theft. The guy who, like I said, his license was stolen. He was lucky that word got to him before the police chased him down, that it wasn't him stealing the car. But in conversations, found out that individual is also wanted in a couple other jurisdictions for doing the same thing. So um, it's probably running right about 50-50 on the preventative side versus the how do we repair this side, which is the important thing, really, is putting it back together after you've been hacked.
Are you getting any kind of different calls since we've been in COVID?
I haven't had a lot of people reaching out directly because of COVID. No, I think that um, both the legal side and the identity side have put in um, COVID-19 responses for small businesses or individuals, or the cyberbullying seminars that they do on identity theft. But I haven't had too many calls directly related to that. Um, no, no, it's
I wonder
mostly
if,
just the normally things.
yeah, and I wonder if part of that is most of us have been home for a while now. Are we more aware of things, or just because somebody's always home, usually there might be less things happening, especially if we're not going out that much.
Yeah, I think that if I had to put a cause on it, I'd say it's general activities kind of calm down. I hope people aren't vacationing as much, not flying as much. We're not, think about your own plans. Fewer people are thinking about going home to grandma's for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and because for home and age reasons and lockdown reasons and travel reasons. So I think that some of that, but I think that that's also going to boost up the cyber side of things. Um, but people are pretty much taking care of it. Like I said, I mean, the calls are pretty steady. I haven't seen a decrease, but I haven't really seen an increase due to the pandemic either.
Yeah, and then with more people on Zoom or Google Meet or GoToMeeting, anything like that, there's even more ways to get into somebody's stuff.
Right, and I think we saw a lot of that at the beginning, and they're talking about Zoom bombers, and how here's the ways. And I think Zoom probably took a little bit of a rap for not having enough security at first, but I think holy mackerel, nobody, it wasn't like they were supposed to be ready to step into this breach. But we do that. We put waiting rooms and we put passwords, and we just begin to kind of figure out what the boundaries of our lives need to be. And so things like that happen. You hear about. Like I said, I haven't been on a Zoom call that's been Zoom bombed. I know they do that, but if you take precautions, and that's really the whole lesson's about, right? Take your precautions, have your protection in place, set up a password, and carry on.
Yeah, I had heard early on, probably in the first couple 3 weeks, of one or two BNI meetings up this way had
Mhm.
a Zoom bomber, but to my knowledge, I've never been on a call where that has happened.
No, you get a couple where, if for those of you who are familiar with Zoom and WebEx and all the other tools, that you might have a phone number pop up, But a lot of times, if you have the waiting room going, you can just send them a message and say, "Hey, who is this?" And chances are it's a member of yours who's calling in from the road versus being at their house. But just, precaution, just common sense, I think is the big thing on that one. If you don't recognize the number, don't let it in your meeting, or keep an eye on them when your hand on the drop button real quick.
Yeah, that's why I enjoy hosting the meetings, because I can mute or kick somebody out really fast. So
It's, you just like having the power of, like having the mute button in one hand and the kick button in the other hand, don't you?
it has its moments. I will not lie. We are here with Chip Galusha, an independent associate of LegalShield. Chip is in GV02, even though he's part of the Triangle BNI. That is Greenville, North Carolina. They meet Tuesday mornings at 8 a.m. Right now, obviously, everything is Zoom. So if you are in the Greenville area, you're looking to meet some very good and successful small business owners, want to try to figure out how to grow your business, please check them out. You can go to trianglebni.com. There's a button there that says find a chapter, and you can find them that way and get the link to the show. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. Folks, you need an email campaign. Had a friend of mine been on social media for 12 years, nice business, and she, on her personal page, she did an, oh, by the way, here's a link to a business seminar I'm doing. And the next morning she woke up and Facebook had kicked her out of their world completely. And every place she has ever commented on was scrubbed. So if you have your own email list, you can control that. So be careful of rented property on Facebook and wherever else. Go to oakcitytech.com. Tell them you're looking for an email, trying to set up an email campaign. They can help you do that. All right, Chip, I think you are the first professor we've had on the show.
Well,
Chip teaches at ECU. He is let me see if I get the official title here right. You are a teaching instructor in leadership and professional development in the College of Business.
Yeah.
Now, in reading
massive title.
Yep, very impressive. In reading your bio, I didn't see anywhere where you had been looking to become a college professor from your days out of school. This just screams of a, oh, by the way, phone call from somebody one day, right?
Surprisingly, it actually was. And I tell the full story now. I don't even think I've even told the guy who called me this story. Well, it was kind of interesting. I had been working corporate jobs, doing the thing, and I you say that it's a bad thing, but I had a lot of fun and I literally traveled the world and was great. And so, if you don't mind being out 40 weeks a year, it's a pretty decent job. To tell the story, that it survived 4 mergers, didn't survive the 5th, and that's how kind of life goes. And so I was back in Greenville working. I was decided just to kind of do some stuff on my own and build that, and literally got a phone call one day from a gentleman who said his name, and I remembered the name, and it's hard to place it. He said something about being in grad school together, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember any of the classes we were in together. And he made a comment about having been over to the house for dinner one time. So I knew this, but I could place. Turns out later, he was a professor of mine in grad school, and I was trying to place him as a co student. But I had gone back to grad school almost by accident. You're right. It was not a big choice, and it's not a thing. But working for BB&T for a number of years, they had a marvelous educational program, and I thought, well, they'll pay for it, and it's an MBA, and it just seemed to make sense. So put that together, used it. It's not like it wasn't of value, but the education was of use, and it helped and build that, and gets me to the place where I got this call, and it says we have a really unusual situation at the university. We may or may not have an opening in the fall for a part-time instructor teaching this particular class. But I essentially thought of you and wondered if you'd be interested in coming in and interviewing.
Wow.
How do you say no to that?
Yeah, and the fact that, and again, the recall of him to go to you, because it obviously had been a while since you two had chatted, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of one of those stories I kind of like to hear it, but then I'm afraid it's just like he happened to stumble across me on Facebook. Goes, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Yes, maybe I didn't quite make the impression I thought I did, but but yeah, so these things, and it's one of the things that I talk about, and kind of going back to also what you're saying about the stuff that people put on Facebook. Stuff follows you, right?
Mm.
I had an opportunity. I go way back to when I first moved into Greenville. I don't know if you're going to get into this or not, but I moved to Greenville in the early '90s to print T-shirts, and it's a marvelous job, and it's the best thing. But I keep getting these choices in my life between fame and fortune, and I keep picking fame. And one of these days, I'm going to pick fortune and be able to retire. But printing T-shirts is a marvelous job. It's a great bunch of people, and we did a lot of work for Nike, and did so much for Nike that they decided to buy the plant. And once they bought it, they didn't need somebody whose job it was to find customers. So, and I listened to my dad, thankfully, and fell back on my computer science degree and then went to work for BB&T. And the guy calls me and he's like, "Yeah, it looks like you moved a lot when you were growing up, and you move a lot." I thought, well, this is the end of this interview. And it turns out that he lived in the city that I lived in, and so it was actually a connection. And so I go to work for him, and took 7 great years doing that. And in the process of that, they have this education program. So I took advantage of it. So this is the deal, right? Take advantage of things that come your way. You never know. It doesn't matter if you know what that leads to or what the plan is. But without that, without the MBA, without the master's, I'd never be in a position to A, have met the guy who called me, but B, to have the qualifications to teach in a university.
And
So
we can maybe assume that, because you wonder why he called you, could we assume maybe the first 12 people said no, and you're just on the list, right?
that's not the story I want to hear, but yeah. But there's the other thing too. Yeah, it's like, that's the old joke. You're not Mr. Right, you're Mr. Right now.
Yeah.
But and if that's the way it goes, that's the way it goes. And if you're going to be the first person that can step up and say yes to the call, then how many things have you done and you've called on and people have said no, 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 and then somebody says yes, and you don't go to the prom with the first girl you ask. You go to the one that the girl says yes, and then maybe you end up getting married. Who knows? It's a great story. So I'm not particularly dying for the details. I could have been number 15. I was the first guy to answer the phone that day. I don't know, but it gets me in the door.
Yeah.
So I was working a small biz, and then started working, and they got a class there and taught. It was a decision modeling class. I had to go back to school and learn how to do Excel modeling the day before I would teach it to students, and because you sometimes get a little bit rusty. So, but built that up, and then they opened up a department, leadership and professional development, had a full-time position, and I was there, and I was able to apply and enrolled into that. So it's about being open to things.
Well,
I think.
yep. And going back to your point, you were on the list, whatever the list was. You're right. You were on those. So you did something somewhere. You made an impression with that guy somehow, some way to stay on the list. And you're right. It's just making those connections, and kind of goes back to, it sounds kind of cheesy and, not believable sometimes, but you probably in some certain situation just did the right thing you were supposed to do. And that's what got you on a radar.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think about all the people that I have on my brain now who may not remember me, but I remember them. I remember the TV show The West Wing, a comment that President Bartlett made. The Supreme Court nominee says, you're not my first choice, but you will be my last choice, right? And I like that in the sense of, I'm sticking with you. It wasn't where I started, but this is where I ended up. So I may not have been their first choice. I actually tell one of my lectures and people, I tell them that it may come as a shock, but I may not be the absolute best professor that ECU has, but I guarantee you that if I quit showing up, they won't have me for very long, right? You have to be there. You have to be in it. And so, yeah, get on the list, I guess, is a great way to look at that. Do what you need to do. And then when your opportunity shows up, you take it. And you don't have to be the first person or the top of the list or whatever.
How many classes are you teaching this semester?
It's an interesting argument, and I always have trouble with that. We kind of have a jargon between classes and preps. I have 2 different classes, 2 different curriculum classes, but like 6 sections of, some are online. So I teach a variety. And then this semester we decided to break it into 2 8-week blocks. So and we're going to have some face-to-face classes, but that didn't work out. But right now I have 3 sections. I have 2 different curriculums, 2 different courses, but 3 sections in total of students. So it's about, it's going to be around 90 90 to 120 students probably.
One of my Zoom pet peeves is like a lot of people these days, I'm on 4 or 5 Zoom calls a day. And one of my pet peeves, especially at a BNI meeting, is when the camera's turned off for a significant period of time. I get if you had to go, refill a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom. I got no problem with that, right? But for a significant period of time, are there what do your students have to do? Do they just have to log in? Do you even take attendance? Do you even care?
Oh man, I used to. Um, and it was part of this deal of our courses being about professional development. Um, Anybody can take an exam, and the question on the exam being, do you have to show up at work to keep your job, true or false? And everybody could answer true to that question. But our class was about showing up every day. So we had a pretty draconian, if you want to use that word, attendance policy. And we got to online, and that kind of went out the window. There are other things that we can learn in terms of how to do group work. I mean, and here we see that the university and the students walking in lockstep with a lot of times their parents in the same house, trying to figure out how to do Zoom. How can I have a meeting? How can I make connections with my peers, my students, my instructors, and do it online? So I dropped a lot of the attendance issues and moved into this way of saying, this is how we got to do things now. How are you going to interact with your students? And they call me or email me and say, hey, I can't get up with one of our group members. They're not participating. And I'm kind of like, well, welcome to how the world's working now. What if you have an employee, right? You're in a business program. What if you have an employee who doesn't show up? How do you deal with it? So moving into that kind of a be there in a work from home environment. We're not doing 9 to 5 really anymore a lot of times. And so just change that skill to how to be the best employee you can be in a work from home environment. Show up for your groups. I do have 3 or 4 sessions throughout the term where we get together and talk about what assignments are coming up and what we need to do and make sure everybody's on the same page. So you have to attend to that. But otherwise, it's your life, it's your time. Here's what you got to do.
And you and I are both consulting directors for BNI. And I told my chapter presidents when we went to Zoom that you're going to find out pretty much all you need to know about all your members. After the first month, then things are going to be like, oh God, I can't believe we're not back meeting. And you'll find out who's engaged and who's not. And I'm sure you found that out about your students.
Yeah, you really do. And it's interesting because there are times when I feel like really down about it. And then I have to remind myself that it's 5 of them. And there are another 90 that are doing just fine. Mm-hmm. And so where do we tend to then put our effort into the squeaky wheel. But you have to remember that there are a whole lot of people that got a thing. I just, looking through emails this morning, 3 people, can't find the assignment, couldn't figure out where to log in. I was like, well, number one, it's 6 or 7 o'clock on a Sunday night, and this has been out since Tuesday. And number 2, why don't you call one of your 80 classmates who figured it out? Now, I don't really want to put it that way, but dig into it. You have to find out. And we're talking about, and then you put that into a leadership professional development. When you get hired, you need to figure out how to do it. That is ultimately your responsibility. It's
and
not there for people to show you.
Yeah. And I've always talked with people about, you can put whatever words you want to put on it, but it's what you do when nobody's looking. And this is one of those situations where, there are people looking at you on the screen, but do you not care what image you put out there? Not a fake image, but a real image. And do you not care because my coaching partner, Trinity, says it the best. We were talking about branding one day on our podcast. And she said, your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. And I thought, man, that is spot on.
Yeah, that's one of those great comments. It's followed by some silence where you go,
yeah, because when you leave, it's like, God, I can't believe that person finally left. They talked all the time. Or worse is, who was that just left?
Yeah. And there's a question of awareness, and Zoom is pretty interesting about that too. And the number of people that you do, and you just kind of look at the situation, and they have a super bright window behind them, and so their face is too dark, or ceiling fans are one of my pet peeves. It just it's whipping around and the lights flickering, and pay attention. I think that's kind of the key. Pay attention um, to what image you're leaving behind. I think that's a brilliant way to think about it. I'm kind of have to factor
It's
that into to a lecture
when she
someone.
said that, I had to stop and think for a minute. And that's exactly right. What do people say about you when you're not there? It should tell you everything, should tell you about what you're giving out to the world.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you need to know.
Yep.
And if we want to kind of swing this around the other way, now that if we're going to put that out there, then I'm going to turn that around and say it's another great reason to be involved in the BNI,
Yep.
because I'm going to see your customers when you don't see your customers, and they may or may not know, what our relationship is, and they may talk about you in a slightly more inhibited way, and I can, or you can bring it back to me, I can bring it back to you, and we can say, here's kind of what you think you're branding, and here's actually what you're branding, and come at you from the standpoint of my goal is to make you better too. So it's not going to be a competitive thing, but it's going to be a helpful and an educational.
And for all small business owners that don't believe this, nobody knows your business like your customers. You may think you're doing something, you may think you're awesome, but go talk to your customers.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see.
Yep. We are here with Chip Galusha, an independent associate of LegalShield. Chip's also a consulting director for BNI. His chapter is GVO2. That's in Greenville, North Carolina. They meet Tuesdays at 8 a.m. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. Folks, if you're like me and you have a zero creative skills with your eyes, because mainly with me, I'm colorblind. And so even if I can tell the colors, I have trouble matching them. And you want to put out an image or some sort of content that's pleasing to the eye and good content with some important information people need to know. The folks at Oak City Tech can help you with things like that, put your plan together, design what you want to send out, and may as well put it in the hands of a professional. Go to oakcitytech.com, tell them what you need. They'll take good care of you. All right, Chip, one of my favorite questions in the show is, how did you meet? Your wife's name is Michelle.
Yes.
How did you and Michelle meet? And do you both tell the story the same way?
We probably tell the same story. I don't think we tell it the same way. I come out of it a little bit more gallant and humorous, and in my version, her version, I was kind of an idiot. And it's happens to be a story where I can almost, literally remember the day. I was in college. She's a couple years older and was working at the snack bar at the college, and we were introduced by a mutual friend for just I don't think she was trying to set us up. I don't know. Just an introduction, and you know how conversations go. And she said something, and I said something, and then she said, "Oh, drop dead." So I did. I just fell on the floor in the middle of the student union. I thought it was humorous, to take her literally. She probably thought I was a bit of a jerk, but that's how it happened. And so we, after an introduction like that, we, obviously remembered each other, and just went from there.
I'm kind of interested now in how you asked her out on the first date.
I don't. That's a good question. That first meeting was so traumatic. I forgot the rest of it. I was in college, right? And so I was a college student. So dates were something a little different. And I by the group of friends that I had, we sort of hung around in the student union and would meet and do our homework there and all of that. So it wasn't so much of a going out to a place like for dinner or for something for dates. It was more of a just spending a lot of time together, and then an event would happen or something would happen at a party, or our friends this, or you're out of work or after work, I'm like, hey, well, why don't you just go hang out with us or do this thing? So never did the whole like show up and go to Red Lobster, wherever you go for first dates. I don't know, but yeah.
How long did it take to get serious?
Oh man, we're good at serious. We must have gotten serious 3 or 4 times, and then not serious, and then serious again, and then not serious, and and all of that. So yeah, it was well, let me see. It's 20 sped. Probably took us about 10 years to get married.
Oh, that long.
Yeah.
That is on
Yeah.
and off.
Yeah. So then I moved, I graduated, moved in jobs, and she was, and then back and forth and back in the same neighborhood and reconnecting and, those sort of things.
Were you rocking any kind of a beard back then?
Nothing like this, let me tell you. Um, yes, if I'd known, I would have, because this was the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. You just stop cutting it and it happens. I think I have some pictures of me, like absolutely clean shaven, but I try and find them and destroy them. But I've always had some sort of it was a mustache or goatee or something. But this
Did,
was 2 years ago for Movember, um,
yeah.
and then I just never reset after that. So
Did you have a good head of hair back then?
I did. Yeah. There's one point, and let this kind of rock your brain. I have college yearbook pictures with like a Peter Frampton fro.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, all you young kids listening, go ask your parents about Peter Frampton's.
Yeah, and for the old folks listening, the album cover, just
Yep.
think about that, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So
Nice.
I saw a recent interview with Peter Frampton, and he doesn't have the same head of hair that he had.
Yeah.
So
No surprise. No surprise. And you two have two daughters, if my information is
yes,
correct.
you got good spies. We do.
What is that? Having raised two sons, what's that like raising two daughters?
See, you asked that, and I raised two daughters. I have no idea what it's like to raise sons, so I don't even know how we compare this. Um, I got pretty good at sponge rolling hair. I know that, and braiding hair and things like that. But it's I've had that questions come up and I thought about it, but I have nothing to compare it to. Um, sometimes I talk to my brother. He's got some of both, and he can kind of make a comparison. But it's just a different way. I'm imagine it's a much different household, having boys and having girls, especially
Yes.
especially a complete set, not like
Yep.
like half and half.
Yeah, because my brother and my sister each have an older daughter and younger son, and my wife and I have two boys. So, did you ever get your toenails or fingernails painted?
No, I never did that. Um, like I said, I got a lot of the mom's too tired to braid my hair for tomorrow, you do it kind of thing. And so I had to
Mhm.
learn how to do that. And I could at some point pretty much tell all the My Little Ponies apart. Yeah.
The big difference is, I think, not having raised a daughter, I'm assuming I wouldn't do this, but with boys, I could, get cuff them in the back of the head. It's like, don't talk to your mother like that. Whereas if I had a daughter, I could have never done that. I'd done, sweetie, please, please don't do that.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I don't and I kind of wonder sometimes. I never had to worry about like walking around a corner and getting like tackled or you
Hmm.
know piled drove or somebody doing
Yeah.
coming back to me. So there's some differences that way. I would imagine the other thing we could tell different stories about is that I probably approached the coming of dating age probably a little bit different than you did.
Yes, you did.
Yeah,
Now, do you have a sister?
I do not. I have a brother. I'm
Okay.
kind of a yeah. No, I came into this thing totally blind.
These two girls things was all new to you, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was. It's really kind of a weird thing. It's like I have a brother. My dad has a brother. My mom has a sister. It's not until we get to my dad's brother, and then he had like two boys and two girls, but it's even. But we came to a bunch of generations. Like my dad couldn't tell me what it's like to have a sister. My mom didn't know about boys, so it was a very. I guess we're pretty selective in how we do that. I don't know how that works out. But.
I always feel for moms who never had a brother, but they've got a son or two, and they try to figure out why at the age of 4, they're jumping off the back of the couch with a towel wrapped around their neck, trying to be a superhero, trying to figure out what in the world are you doing?
Yeah,
So, but that's what boys will be boys. A couple
yeah.
weeks ago in my Toastmasters group, we were talking about favorite toys growing up. And I had that huge yellow Tonka dump truck.
Mm.
And I liked it because I could put just about anything I needed to in there and just drive it around the house, or I could ram it into my little brother, which was equally as fun. So that's what little brothers are for. I don't know who has one out there, but that's the purpose my little brothers are.
Yeah, and they're also little brothers are good for blaming things on too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Grandkids yet?
Yeah, 5.
Nice. I got
think,
one, so
yeah,
5 has to
I
be
had to
awesome.
mentally count before that happens. Yeah, it's 5.
Yep, there you go.
No one.
Well, I'm having more fun than I ever thought I would with mine, who's 2. So I can't imagine how much fun 5 are.
It's interesting. It just they go in there, and that way I get into this is the interesting thing. So we're talking about children, but with um, 3 boys and 2 girls, had a quick calculation there. So I get to see how not to be the father of boys, but be the grandfather of boys is different. See how they grew up and see how their sisters and to watch them just fight like brothers and sisters do, which is totally, like I said, foreign to my family because I never had either as a sister or mixed kids, and so I get to watch them do all the stuff. And there's one family's 2 older boys and a younger girl, and she's man, these guys got to watch out. She's gonna just deck them one day. They're going to go a little bit too far, and she's just going to haul off and lay one of them low, and then they'll figure out who the really tough one is.
How old are the kids, and do they live near you guys?
Yeah, everybody's close within if not the city limits of Greenville, certainly the environs, 20 minutes either way. And let me see, what do we got now? It's like 7th grade down to just walking. So it's a good
Then
start.
you have a pretty good perspective of, I'm assuming your students still fall into the millennial category.
I know.
Is it
I don't think so. I think millennials, I think we're into Gen Z or something.
Gen Z?
now.
Okay. So
I think millennials are pushing more like the high 20s, but
because my boys are 33 and 30, and they're both millennials, but I just didn't know when it cut off. So,
yeah.
But this gives you the chance to look at that generation. You're teaching them, what are you learning? And now you've got a whole nother generation that you're part of their being raised. So it's got to be interesting watching those 2 generations compared to what we, without telling our old guy get off the lawn stories, how we grew up.
Yeah, and I do tell a lot of those stories. Every once in a while in class, I'll say a thing, I'll have to double check. It's like, does that make sense? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, I got to quit using old books and old movies as references and all that. But it's interesting, and I think that there's been a lot about these generations that are written. It's kind of unflattering, but I buy into the Simon Sinek approach to things, and I wonder what happened to me. I guess it really wouldn't be my generation. I just have to figure out if my kids are millennials, so they're anyway. But what did we do as raising? Because you change the generation that comes after you and how you raise them. And I think that there was a whole lot about tiger parents and helicopter parents and snowplow parents and however you wanted to frame that. And somehow out of the growing up that we did and bragging about kind of the Facebook bragging about how, we ate lead paint, we're fine, who rode in the back of a pickup truck, share this and all that kind of stuff. And we end up with kids that don't do that kind of stuff, or maybe we get too protective, or so what is it that's happened in that generation? But regardless, and I don't really care about whose fault it is, that's not the important thing, but there is a big difference in how you approach things and how you stick with things. And I see it a lot in terms of like I said, we have to kind of have talking about couldn't figure out how to do the homework assignment. And what did you try? Where did you look? Did you? And no, and so somehow that's changed. And so to see that happen, to your point, I do tend to kind of maybe go swing the pendulum the other way with the grandkids and make them look stuff up or figure it out. But I tell you, in that same light of things, my one daughter said, she's a teacher, she's assistant principal now, and she admitted one day that her kids would say to her she'd make them look something up or figure something out, and they'd be like, "Oh, this is so unfair." And she told him, she looked at him, said, "I said the same thing to my dad too."
Says every kid ever.
Hopefully we're kind of passing that along, and maybe they'll be okay. But there is a lot of difference. I don't see as tremendous a difference, I think, back to like my grandparents, my parents, and me, as I see between the difference in generationally between me and my kids and their kids.
Yeah, and with you and I growing up, our curiosity was all outside because we had no technology. We had the game Pong, right? The 2 paddles going up and down. And we thought we were living high on the hog with Pong. But our folks would, my parents would say, just go out and play, and there were no parameters or directions. We just had to go out and play. And now, hopefully, the same type of curiosity. I know it's digital now, but hopefully, there's that same type of curiosity to learn things or create something in those generations as well.
I think so, and that's the good to come out of it. And along with the, like I said, the get off my lawn stories, I don't particularly want the world to change, but it is, and it's becoming more of what it is, and hopefully that curiosity does tend to do. I think we changed from generations before us. We had time to go out and play. We didn't have to work in the fields, and we didn't have to help, harvest whatever it is. And so you get to be a child and you get to go out. I don't know that it's the kind of world where you could just leave the house on Saturday morning and come home when the streetlights are on anymore. So it changes in a number of different ways, but there is that shift. The creativity is coming in different ways and different things. And somebody got creative and created Zoom. And so here we are. And the world moves. And yeah, there is a different kind of creative, and it's hard to step aside sometimes and say, and from whatever it is in books and movies. I see it in music a lot. I try and, think, oh man, the music when I grew up was so much better. And a friend of mine has a bumper sticker that says music was so much better when ugly people were allowed to make it. And it's just a different thing, right? And so how do you just accept that and let them be creative, and them and the new artists and the new genres to be creative in the way that they want to be creative? It's not, it's not the same. It's not the same world in so many ways.
Yep, I'm with you on that. We're here with Chip Galusha, Independent Associate of LegalShield. Chip's a BNI Consulting Director. He's also in GVO2. They meet in Greenville, North Carolina every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. It's by Zoom right now. So all you have to do is throw on a collared shirt, just sit down and meet some wonderful small business owners. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. Folks, you got to have a website. If they can't find you, do you really exist? So go get a website, even as simple as it can be, but you got to send people somewhere to learn more about you. Let that website work while you're sleeping or doing something else, but go to oakcitytech.com and it'll help you get that set up and running. All right, Chip, how do we, going back to all kinds of security, what can we do? What simple things can we do just to make sure our stuff hasn't been hacked or is still in our, in our possession, stuff like that?
Well, I'm not sure if you meant that as like a huge softball throw for my pitch to be like the simplest and easiest thing you could do would be to get an ID Shield subscription.
Fair enough.
But I'm going to throw that out there. It's just kind of, where we're going to go right off the bat. But care and caution goes a long way. I changed out a while ago to a password manager, and there's plenty of them out there. I picked one that was kind of open source, which I liked, so that hundreds of people can check the code that care about it, but not just to use the same passwords, not to use the same PIN codes. And yes, it's problematic to remember them, but there's password savers and apps that you can use to create that. And there's a comedian, if you check the YouTubes, you'll find it, a guy talking about passwords and how kind of the iteration of passwords. And it's funny because like half the ones he talks about I had, right? It's like, it's password, but then you can't do that. So you change the S's into 5s, and then you put an exclamation at the end, and everybody's done that. And we know that. And so I was looking at an infographic the other day that it's if you have a random 10-digit password, it would take like X amount of time for somebody to hack that. If you go to like 12 digits, 12 characters, it adds like exponentially like 36 more years to the computer time taken that on average it would need just to go from 10 to 12 characters. So I've started to bump my passwords up to 12 characters. I try not to use simple stuff. One of the things I like to do is you have those security questions that they ask, right? It's like, what's your mother's maiden name? Make up a name.
Oh,
I mean, it doesn't have those. You don't have to answer those truthfully. Okay. And so as long as, I don't think anybody knows the pets I had, but one of the questions is what's your first pet's name? And I just picked my favorite pet's name. Right. So even if you know my first pet, you can't get that question right. You won't get my mother's maiden name.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'd never thought about doing that because I guess none of us do that because we're afraid we'll forget that we put down Fido instead of Spike.
Yeah, that also true. And that does do a thing, but you can, I don't know,
Mike, I
Is
have a
it-
question.
Yep. Go ahead, Amnon.
Chip, why do banks still insist on a 4-digit PIN when they can go to higher, to 6 or 7 or 8? And a lot of the organizations don't allow you to use any of the funny characters. No at, no pound, alphanumeric only.
Yeah,
With
that's a good
everything.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of my close friends will tell you is I don't do why questions because I have no idea why a bank does that. But the other thing I've noticed is interesting. The passwords along the same lines is that they say, you know, capital, small number, and a special character. They make you have all 4 of those categories.
That's nice. Many of them.
And I would think, well, you can use any of these. You know, if you want to have like just all lowercase, that should be as hard to break if the potentials are there. But so yeah, so that's a really interesting question into this to the cyber stuff. Only 4 digits and only numbers. To me speaks to programming issues. Issues may not be the right word. But they built the systems in a day with that. And so now think about it, if you went back in to change the ATM system to accept, you know, 6 digits or to accept special characters, you know, how many lines of code are you going to have to change somewhere? We can really flash back and talk about Y2K if you want to talk about, you know, code and digits. But yeah, some are 4, some are 6, some have to be. You know, and of course, if it's ever 5, everybody just puts in their zip code, and that's always a bad thing.
My guess is there's just not been a breach so bad through a 4-digit PIN code that they've not had to change it yet.
I think that's good. Not that we know of.
Yeah,
that's true.
Good point. The other thing I was thinking about real quick is the places where you have a 4-digit PIN code. So like a 4-digit PIN code on an ATM machine isn't that horrible. It's 4 digits. If you got 10, 0 to 9 is 10 digits 4, so it's 10 to the 4th. So 10 of 10 is 100 times 10 is 1,000 times 10. So there's 10,000 possibilities. The chances of you sitting in your car at a bank while you kind of pedal through 10,000 possibilities before the machine takes your card is minimal. Online, where you could have a little program running calculations, then yeah, you're probably not going to find so many 4-digit codes too. So I think some of it's the physical security of it as well.
Right, and you were
after
saying
6 tries they steal your card and make you come to the bank, then you know 4 digits is fine because you got 10,000 possibilities. If you don't hit it in the first 6, you're out.
Yeah, and they don't let you go that many times.
Right.
Anyway, but you were saying that you don't have to answer those questions, those 3 questions or 2 truthfully, and it's true. And remember, you don't lose anything by putting just junk in there. The only thing that would help you is if you're trying to recover your password faster. You can always call some at the bank and ask them.
Yeah, you're right. It not only does it not have to be true, it doesn't have to be English either. I mean, you could just put gobbledygook, and there's one thing where you can take like a favorite saying or favorite quote and just take the first initial of it, and you know you can figure out you like Shakespeare a lot. You know, to be or not to be could be TBO, you know, whatever, and so it has something that matters to you, or it could just not. If you just lose it, it just takes you a bit longer to figure it out. I do have an email address, an old Yahoo email address that I haven't been able to use in 8 years because I can't remember my security codes and they won't let me reclaim it. So I have no idea how full that account is, but just couldn't remember to recover it.
And part of those answers, though, you were speaking earlier, if you know somebody well enough, you may kind of be able to answer at least 1 or 2 of those. But the other thing is social media, odds are good. You know, if I was there, well, my mom, I wouldn't have posted my mom with her maiden name on there, but I'd have shown you a picture of my dog or told you about the story of the first city we lived or a school I went to. So you're right. Social media probably exposes us to a little bit more than that.
Yeah. And so now, and think about that too. That's true. My mom was never on social media. So that's not a question, but my oldest grandson, since 12 ish, his mom was on social media before she was ever married. So there are probably people that are, you could go back and trace that back. And so you got her maiden name real easy. So his tag of your mother's maiden name becomes a lot easier for somebody to figure out because it's within one lifetime that they've all been on the medias.
True. By
And
the
so
way, what nationality is Galusha?
oh, I don't know if we're getting close to the end, but it's a very long story. I don't know. My grandmother did a lot of genealogy before ancestry.com and found out that it's probably misspelling. It was more likely SKI at the end. It was probably changed at some point in a migration. And that also, and we have a family debate on how many generations back. I think it was 4, may have been 5. There was a fire and the house burned down. The parents were killed in the fire, and the 2 boys, I believe, were taken in by the neighbors. And the neighbor's last name was Galusha. So they just took the name of the neighbors. So bloodline wise, I think, and then when the way the story goes, if I stick with bloodline, my last name would be Berry, like Berry. But
Any chance Michelle's maiden name was Smith?
Chance, but you never know.
It was semi-normal versus marrying into the name Galusha, right?
No, they are relatively her. She did ponder for a minute. I don't know. My name's a lot,
That's true love after 10 years on and off, right? Are you still doing your voiceover work?
If randomly, for some stuff. I have a couple people that I've done it for, and I do a couple music or messaging on hold things. If you call her in Greenville every once in a while, you'll hear me. But
for the right answer, press 1.
Yeah.
For more spin, press 2. So.
Yeah. If you don't care, press pound.
Yeah. Any truth to the rumor you still do, or have made goat cheese?
Oh, I never made goat cheese. So I can't you're not allowed to sell goat milk unless you pasteurize it, but nobody really wants it pasteurized, I guess. And people that have goats don't have pasteurization things. So goat cheese is a goal of mine. But I have to find some way to, well, of course, always obeying every law to come into some goat milk. But yeah.
Can I assume somebody at the wonderful university you work at could probably help you pasteurize that?
Well, but the problem is, you see, you don't really want it pasteurized. The fermentation in the process, fermentation itself is a better storage process than canning. And we don't want to have to go into the whole process about how botulism came about because of canning. But fermentation, so the more I think about it, the more everything I love is fermented. Cheese, beer, bread, all that's all fermented. That creates a highly acidic environment that is a lot safer. So any cheese that is made with non-pasteurized milk can actually be sold legally in stores after it's aged for like more than 60 or 90 days because the fermentation renders it completely safe. But it's the sale of the unpasteurized milk because you want it unpasteurized when you ferment it.
I like the fact that you put beer number 2. I'm also quite surprised now that you don't make your own beer in your garage, or do you?
I'm not saying I haven't. I haven't made any in about a year, but I've got the setup out there now that the days are colder. It's really being outside and boiling, 16 gallons of water for an hour, and when it's 108 is like no fun. But in the fall, sitting outside in the back, with a little big old Bunsen burner thing going and a big pot of boiling water actually adds some heat to your life, and it makes for a better way to do it. So, and
here in the South, we just call that tailgating.
There you go. Yeah, I'm working on my tailgate. We'll have it in about 6 weeks because it's going to take that long for everything to get ready.
Oh yeah. Chip, we've been flashing your phone number up here. That's one of the ways folks can get in touch with you. What's another way they can find you if they want to?
Well, here's a really sweet way. You're talking about websites and the way to do all that. And I do have one. And when you see the graphic and you see my name, you can just go to chipgalusha.com because oddly enough, that wasn't taken in the domain world. And,
you were shocked it was available, right?
I was surprised. It was available, and also cost me like $1.99 for the first year. So not a real popular one, but yeah, you could do that. Just chipgalusha.com, and that will get you to all kinds of wonderful services and my phone number and emails and all of that kind of stuff.
All right. And folks, think long and hard about your security and your protection in general. Go take a peek at what you have and where you're putting stuff out. Chip obviously would be a huge resource for you, but just make sure your stuff is protected. as best you can, and you're doing the things you need to do to make sure it stays protected. Chip, we've enjoyed it very much. Thanks for being on the show today.
No, absolutely. I've enjoyed myself a lot. And I think you're right. First thing, be safe. Second thing, if I can help you do it, that'd be great too. But first thing, be safe.
All right, man. We appreciate it very much. You and I will cross paths down the road. And folks, we'll see everybody next time on Triangle BNI.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.